let me just start off by saying that I absolutely love the rain. Like, I jizz every time that we get rain here in the valley, but it rains like twice a year. The worst part sometimes is that you're asleep and then you wake up and the ground is absolutely covered in puddles. Yes, it rains like 2 to 3 times a year, and one of those times it just rains at like 2 in the morning, when the only real puddle that you actually experience is that disgusting little puddle of drool on your pillow. But anyways, all that nonsense aside, I wanted to start doing a couple of new videos for each individual line, which is essentially me rambling on about pure speculation here. I'm just going to throw out my personal wish list and then stuff that has been in the rumor mill for quite some time. These aren't leaks per se, whereas in, like, for example, the DC Multiverse, there were a lot of figures that had been rumbled. There have been like hardcore rumors or people that, you know, are insiders that have talked a lot about some of these figures. In today's video, it's just wish list. It's just random nonsense about what we could see in the foreseeable future. And today specifically, we're only going to be talking about the McFarlane line in general. So we're talking about DC Multiverse, Collector's Edition line, DC Direct, so on and so forth, because we know that he has like a million different sublines nowadays. So I do plan on going back and actually talking about other action figures that we could potentially see for other lines, maybe the Marvel Legends line, so on and so forth. As I said, we did do a video at the beginning of the year that was mostly like leaked information or potentially leaked information. This I have no foundation for. Like, nobody's really talking about this, but it's still fun to talk about what could potentially be. So here we have it, the 2025 speculation video for the DC Multiverse, or just action figures from McFarlane in general, or DC action figures. The first figure that I wanted to talk about here is something that we've been craving for quite some time, and that is a comic book accurate King Shark. We did receive the live action appearance of him, which was, I believe, in the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn Suicide Squad film, and then eventually we did see, I think, like comic book iterations or like actual comic book runs that had that similar look for King Shark, which is essentially just this big giant blubbery shark going around eating everything. But there was a time, more specifically during the Rebirth era, where King Shark was definitely this big imposing character. He had muscles, he was huge, he was bulking, unlike what we're seeing nowadays, where yeah, it was pretty cool to see King Shark in a different light, but me personally, that's not my King Shark. That's not my prototypical vision of him. And so I would love to see a comic book accurate King Shark. We did also receive, I believe, a Beast Kingdoms version. However, that was also based on his live action adaptation, and that one scales a little bit too big for the DC Multiverse, although I guess it doesn't really matter because he is usually a much bigger character regardless of what source material you're looking at. We did get a DC Multiverse Mattel's version. I think it was a Build-A-Figure for King Shark. However, that one again doesn't really scale too well. The articulation is massively outdated, and I just don't think that it would necessarily fit in with your current McFarlane DC Multiverse. Now, all of the next few figures are relatively new. I think most of them made their debuts in the last few years, and that's what I wanted today's video to kind of reflect. I wanted to talk about newer characters, newer figures, because it seems like all of the classic iterations have already been mostly covered by McFarlane in his DC Multiverse or his Collector's Edition line. And the first character that definitely draws my eye has to be Respawn. For those people that haven't really read up on this particular character, it's pretty interesting. It's essentially what would happen if Slade Wilson had a child with Talia, although I guess they didn't really have a child. They just essentially used the genetic material for each of them and then created Respawn. What's interesting is he actually fights Damian Wayne in one of his comic book story arcs, so it would be really interesting to get a character that actually fits directly with Damian Wayne. And I really like his look. It's kind of like a mixture of a young Deathstroke mixed with like a little bit of Deadpool in there. As I said, I love the aesthetics, I love the look, and even though I don't necessarily love the Damian Wayne action figure because of that awful mid-torso, I think they could still like maybe reuse some of the limbs and the arms just to make it a little bit more feasible for McFarlane. But I would love to see this character. As I said, definitely a newer one, but I would still love to see him in action figure form. And keeping with that same style of getting newer, younger DC characters, we also have Starchild, who made her first appearance in 2021. And look, don't get me wrong, I love absolute classics in terms of the DC Multiverse line. us getting almost every iteration of Batman and Superman and Green Lantern and Wonder Woman and Flash, but I definitely feel like it's time to kind of rejuvenate the entire line, and this is yet another one of those like newer, younger characters that I think could easily kind of become like a key cornerstone of the future of DC comic books. And speaking of the future of DC comic books, we could easily slot in Jonathan Kent here, who we all know as Superman and Lois Lane's son. Now, granted, for most of the characters that I'm mentioning on today's list, you would definitely need brand new body molds or brand new sculpts, even though, as I said, you could reutilize some of like Damian Wayne's limbs and things of that nature. I would love to see a brand new mold for Jonathan Kent, even if it meant paying a little bit extra for the DC Collector's Edition line, for example, and we got, some extra little face plates and things of that nature. But I think he's definitely one of the most disrespected, or I should say underappreciated or underrated comic book characters in the last like 15 years. And if you're looking for some decent comic book runs, there was a comic book story arc not too long ago that actually featured the sons of both Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne, and it was a really interesting storyline all around. Great narrative, pretty good solid dialogue and storytelling. If you guys are interested in kind of brushing up a little bit more on Jonathan Kent, I think this is a phenomenal comic book run. And as I mentioned earlier, we already have Damian. We already have a lot of younger characters, and I think we need to flesh out that display a little bit more, and Jonathan Kent just makes perfect sense in my personal opinion. Moving over to the Bat family, we could potentially also see a Bluebird, aka Harper Row. Now, this particular character was actually brought to us by none other than Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. And for those of you guys that actually read comic books consistently, you guys are very familiar with both of these names. They're big heavy hitters in the DC comic book universe. She also made her first comic book appearance not too long ago, way back in 2011. So a relatively new character to DC comic books. A lot of people like to consider her the female version of like Nightwing, or sometimes even closer to Red Hood. But again, she stands on her own. She's definitely a character that has garnered quite a bit of a cult following over the past few years. And that's essentially what I think McFarlane should be doing at this point. He shouldn't be giving us so many mainstream characters. I think it's about time that, he continues to give us a lot of these deep cuts. And like I said, it's essentially what most waves have been thus far. There's maybe like one marquee character, like one Superman or a Batman, and then everything else are these like random obscure characters that not many people are familiar with. I've also always wanted a first appearance Doomsday action figure. Obviously, he made his appearance way back in 1992, and he was the dude that essentially ended Superman for a little bit. Eventually, he would come back to life. But Doomsday has always been like a big marquee character, and it's interesting that we haven't gotten an accurate full representation of him from his first appearance. I think what we've gotten is kind of a little bit more of a McFarlane version of Doomsday, but I would love to see like a comic book accurate full representation of him. However, the one that I'm referring to is the one where he actually still has the green suit on. Let's not forget like the first few panels or the first issue that he's in, he's wearing like this big giant ugly green suit. And I believe if I'm not mistaken, we got an action figure that was actually his first full appearance in that green suit like 20 something years ago. But I would love to see a deluxe style release from McFarlane. I think it's about time. Maybe something where Doomsday's face is like starting to peek out of the green suit, or maybe some of the spikes on his arm or his legs are starting to peek through the suit. Or maybe we just get Doomsday in that whole green suit. Now, I will say, I think this is probably somewhat of a long shot just because it appears this would probably be like a brand new sculpt. He wouldn't be able to like reuse arms or limbs, which is something that he's been doing a lot recently. Let's not forget that Doomsday actually did use certain pieces from that death metal Batman that was supposed to be like a mixture of Batman or a combination of Batman with Doomsday. If I'm not mistaken, they reutilized the arms and then maybe a part of the torso. I don't own that particular Doomsday action figure, so I could be wrong. But I know for a fact that Doomsday action figure was a little bit of reuse, so a green suited Doomsday would definitely be like an all brand new action figure. But it would definitely be a welcomed addition for us DC Multiverse collectors, especially considering we haven't really gotten like a ton of Superman villains or Superman centered characters. Like, we do get some big marquee characters here and there, but they're very far in between. It seems like everything is Batman centered, or it's something based in the movieverse. So as I said, the chances of actually getting this action figure are incredibly slim, but as I said, this video is about speculating. It's about having fun with it and just kind of being able to get a little creative with what it is that we want from McFarlane in the DC Multiverse line. Next up, we have some action figures that I've actually already mentioned in a previous video, but I'm kind of just rehashing it and bringing it out for anybody that hasn't watched that particular video. And essentially, I would love to see a Gotham police force, whether it's just like in their normie blue uniforms or like a riot gear Gotham police force. And these could be really awesome army builders. And then obviously in there, you could throw in like a Commissioner Gordon or any other central characters from the police force in Gotham City. Maybe we could get like a standard male police officer and then a female officer, and then, as I said, maybe some riot gear with a little bit of battle damage. As I said, this would make perfect sense not only for us collectors that we want to flesh out or display a little bit more. Maybe we want a Commissioner Gordon surrounded by his officers or being backed up by his officers, or maybe Batman beating some crooked cops to a pulp. I mean, it's just another opportunity to, like I said, flesh out the display a little bit more, and it's a great opportunity for McFarlane to get some easy reuse out of some figures. And then, since he loves to do this type of reuse for a lot of his DC Multiverse action figures, he could have the regular mainline release where it's just like clean cut officers, and then maybe have some like store exclusives, like a Walmart exclusive or a Target exclusive that has maybe some minor little specks of blood all over the uniform, maybe a little bit of bruising on the face, maybe they've just been in a little bit of a scuffle, maybe even a little bit of a cut lip or a black eye. And maybe these officers didn't actually get in a scuffle outside, like with criminals. Maybe they just made their wives really angry. Maybe they forgot to lift the toilet seat before they started peeing. I don't know. But I feel like this is a great opportunity for McFarlane to give consumers something that they desperately need, or maybe they don't desperately need, but I think once they actually see it, they would really want it. And then at the same time, he's able to reuse body molds incessantly because, as I said, it's a great army builder for people that like to have really big eccentric displays. And then lastly, I've already floated this idea in a previous video. Love to see just some normie looking superheroes, maybe like a clean cut Bruce Wayne in like a suit, maybe a comic book accurate Lois Lane, or a Clark Kent with his curly little hair and, you know, his nerdy glasses with his tie a little bit undone. I've already mentioned Commissioner Gordon, maybe even an Alfred, because we know that millionaires can do stuff on their own. They have to have people, you know, cook for them or, you know, wipe their ass, whatever it is that they do. But yeah, I would love to see like some normie versions of our characters. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I would love to see something that's comic book accurate, but still kind of vague enough to where it can fit into multiple different displays, because we don't want something that's from like the animated series. We also don't want something that's a little bit too classic. We want it to be somewhere in the middle. And as much hate as I've been giving McFarlane recently, they actually do a pretty good job when it comes to this. They kind of take a concept or a particular source material and they kind of spin it and make it their own. And I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for him to do something like this. Make, you know, the Clark Kent or the Bruce Wayne or the Lois Lane be able to fit into like almost any display that you have right now. But honestly, I could, you know, just name a bunch of characters without their superpowers, like maybe a Hal Jordan in a power down mode, maybe even a Harley Quinn in her normal attire when she was like a therapist, maybe. Again, I'm kind of just spitballing at this point, but I would love to see something like that. Just normal looking characters for your display. Maybe you could have your Clark Kent displayed right underneath your Superman in like one of those flight stands. Same thing with like Bruce Wayne standing right under the Batman on a flight stand or something along those lines. But look, honestly, we could do this all day. I could just sit in here and tell you about like a million different characters that we could potentially see in the foreseeable future from the DC Multiverse line or the Collector's Edition line. But this is kind of just me throwing out some random figures that I've always wanted from the DC Multiverse line. They're not necessarily based on anything, None of these have ever been rumored, or at least as far as I know, they haven't really been rumored too much. This is just stuff that I would love to see in action figure form, and I think it works both ways. McFarlane kind of gets an opportunity to reuse a lot of these or mass produce these on a higher scale than most figures, and at the same time, us as consumers, we get some really deep cuts. We get some characters that we haven't seen in action figure form in a long time, or maybe ever. As I said, this was kind of just a random video that I threw together. It's nothing too intense. I didn't even write anything down. It's just kind of like random DC comic book characters that came to my mind that I feel like deserve to be in action figure form. As always, this is just my personal take, my personal opinion. I'm very curious to see what all of you guys have to say. Let me know down below, what is the speculation? What are some figures that you would love to see from the DC Multiverse line from McFarlane within the 2025 year? Did I mention any that were on your wish list, or do you disagree with any characters that I have on today's particular video? As I said, I could do this all day. I could name 1,000 different characters, but these are just some of the ones that came to my mind when I sat in front of my mic here today. I've already mentioned it a couple of times, but if you guys are interested in following me on Instagram, I do plan on having shorter style format content on there. It's mostly just going to be like some action figure photography or some random action figure poses. The longer formats and the ranting are still going to be on this particular channel, but the shorter stuff, the stuff that's like just a few seconds or under a minute, is going to go up on our Instagram channel. Now, as I said, I haven't really gotten an opportunity to kind of flesh out the content there. It's still very scarce. There's only like a few videos on there, but I do plan on starting to upload more consistently on there. And then I would be an absolute buffoon if I didn't mention our other channel, which I've already done a couple of times, but essentially we talk about like comic book based movies and things of that nature. Essentially anything that's pop culture or comic book related, I like posting on that channel. It doesn't have a wide library or a wide variety of content. As I said, it's kind of like just a little bit of a side project. I do plan on uploading more consistently on there as well, but I think we're up to like maybe one video every couple of weeks or something like that. But if you guys just like action figure ranting, this is your channel. This is the spot. If you guys like just listening to me ramble on about action figures, then you found the right spot. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned, because we do upload about 4 to 5 times on a weekly basis. We do want to ramp that up eventually, but stay tuned. We do upload, and we have a few pretty big projects on the way for this particular channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. Sometimes we tend to get a little bit too negative when it comes down to collecting, but it's always important to kind of, go back to the roots, go back to why it is that we love doing this. Pose your figures, photograph them, just mess around with them and enjoy them. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.